Good afternoon, shalom. Our first scripture reading comes from the writings of the prophet Ezekiel, chapter 33, verses 1 through 6. The word of Adonai came to me. Human beings, speak to your people. Say to them, suppose I bring the sword on a country, and the people of that country take one of their men and appoint him their watchman. Now, if upon seeing the sword coming against that country, he blows the shofar and warns the people, then if the sword comes and takes away someone who heard the sound of the shofar but paid no attention to it, the responsibility for that person's death would be his own. He heard the shofar but paid no attention, so the responsibility for his death is his own. Whereas, if he had paid attention, he would have saved his life. But if the watchman sees the sword coming and does not blow the shofar, so that the people are not warned, and then the sword comes and takes any of them, that one is indeed taken away in his guilt, but I will hold the watchman responsible for his death. Second scripture reading comes from Revelation, the 18th chapter, verses 9 through 14. The kings of the earth who went whoring with her and shared her luxury will sob and wail over her when they see the smoke as she burns. Standing at a distance for fear of her torment, they will say, "Oh no, the great city, in a single hour your judgment has come." The world's businessmen weep and mourn over her because no one is buying their merchandise anymore. Stocks of gold and silver, gems and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, all rare wood, all ivory goods, all kinds of things made of scented wood, brass, iron, and marble, cinnamon, cardamom, incense, myrrh, frankincense, wine, oil, flour, grain, cattle, sheep, horses, chariots, and bodies, and people's souls. The fruits you lusted for with all your heart are gone. All the luxury and flashiness have been destroyed, never to return. Third scripture reading comes from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24, verses 32 and 33. Now let the fig tree teach you a lesson. When its branches begin to sprout and leaves appear, you know that summer is approaching. In the same way, when you see all these things, you know that the time is near, right at the door. And our final reading is not a scripture reading at all. It's from the writings of author Eric Qualman. History repeats itself because nobody listens the first time. Well, today is the 25th of Tammuz. On the Jewish calendar, next Thursday at sundown begins the month of Av, and 28 days after that is the first of Elul, the month during which we begin blowing the shofar as a warning that Yom Teruah and the High Holy Days are fast approaching. On the Christian liturgical calendar, it is the 6th Sunday after Trinity. Tomorrow is the feast of St. James the Apostle. I want to remind you of something we studied a couple of years ago. You may recall that we did a year-long study on the book of Revelation, specifically at interpreting it as much as possible through the eyes of a late first century Messianic Jew. Specifically, I want to focus on a couple of key issues. The first is the cyclic nature of history. There have been several time periods in the last 2 millennia that met the criteria of what John was describing as the time of Messiah's return. Each time these windows, which is what I call them, have cycled around, they have met the criteria to an even greater extent than in the previous cycle. The upshot of this is that every time a window has cycled around, Many in the Christian community have been sure that Messiah is returning immediately. This has frequently resulted in some very strange and occasionally tragic behaviors on their part. Rather than focusing on helping others in their own community get through some very turbulent times, they have abandoned all responsibility, sure that they are going to be raptured at any moment. The other thing that I want to remind you of is the understanding that we developed about three key villains in John's vision: the beast, the Antichrist, or Shechar Mashiach, and the great whore, or the whore of Babylon. Traditional Christian interpretation has focused on linking each of these to specific individuals in the public eye at that time. Another favorite interpretational stunt is to identify the whore with somebody else's church. But if you will recall from our study, these interpretations would not have been consistent with John's understanding of his vision. Each of the three villains is representative of a social force, and these are found in other Jewish writings as well. This is how we can interpret them. The beast represents a strong, aggressive nation in the model of Rome, a superpower, if you will. The Antichrist represents a corrupted, apostate version of Christianity, Christianity warped and distorted. And the whore represents runaway commerce and the pursuit of earthly wealth. The interaction of the three figures in John's vision depict an apostate religious movement that aligns itself with the government to increase its power and influence, and both the government and the religious movement shamelessly indulge in the activities of international commerce with the goal of enriching themselves and their key personnel. Now, if all of this sounds like a description of what's going on in our country, it should. We are in one of those windows that we spoke of. In John's vision, it all falls apart, starting with the collapse of the international commerce system. And we need to pay attention to that because there is another cyclic phenomenon in the scripture, the cycle of the Shemitah, or the Sabbath years. Every 7 years, the earth is to be given a rest. Without going into all the intricate details, in general, agriculture is to cease for the year. There is a reset of the economy, and the growth of wealth stops. Historically, humanity, including Israel, has had a bit of a problem in keeping the Shemitah. So for the last several cycles, we've been given a helping hand, as it were. In 2001, we had a significant recession in the wake of the 9/11 attacks. In 2008, we had the Great Recession. We don't have depressions anymore. We have recessions. Depressions are bad for political reputations. In 2015, we had another severe downturn of the economy. Every one of these occurred at the onset of a Shemitah year, and every one of them had their triggering event on or within 24 hours of Yom Teruah, the beginning of the Shemitah. You will notice that the last one we mentioned was 7 years ago. Yom Teruah is coming up on the 26th of September, beginning the Shemitah year. It's just an observation, not a prediction. You can draw your own conclusions. In each of those previous disasters, the government bailed out the business moguls who were responsible for the disaster. To put it in John's terms, the beast came to the rescue of the whore. Now, there are a lot of economic storm clouds on the horizon at the moment. You've heard the excuses. Supply chain issues brought about by the pandemic. Record heat waves damaging farmlands. Depletion of water reservoirs. Let's look at one small segment of the economy for an example. Let's look at the price of beef. Most of the beef in the national diet is raised in Texas and Oklahoma. Now, they have been under a lengthy drought in that period, or in that region, to the extent that 4/5 of the pasture land in Texas is rated as poor or very poor. Normally, if cattle can't be raised on pasture, you bring in hay. But the area affected is so large, so vast, and fuel prices for trucking are so high that feeding hay is impractical. So ranchers are sending significant parts of their herds to market several months early. That means that they weigh less, and that reduces the supply available, driving prices up. Coupled with this, the Whore of Babylon, the Commodities Exchange, views this as an opportunity to score some significant profits, further inflating the prices. So far, ranchers are sending stock to market that is a few months away from when they would normally go to market. But the situation isn't getting any better. Barring some major weather event, like a hurricane or a tropical storm, that parks over the region long enough to break the drought, this situation will get worse. We are already starting to see bare spots on the shelves of the stores. One of the greatest vulnerabilities of our nation is the fact that a large city has 72 hours supply of food on the shelves. And a great many city people shop every day for what they will fix in the next 24 hours. The various subscription food services rely on that practice. But as shipping costs have risen, this has become an increasingly expensive option, and it is so expensive that it is not an option for a very large segment of the population. Food insecurity is already an issue here in the land of plenty, the United States, and it is going to get worse. Since most of our manufactured goods come from overseas and the supply chain is already strained, we can expect to see shortages in many other goods. As we look at this apocalyptic window that we appear to be in, we need to be making realistic preparations for some serious hard times. Whether Messiah comes this time or not, we need to be helping each other prepare for and deal with some difficult times ahead. That's a far more responsible approach than waiting around for the rapture. And it fits well within our creed, our slogan of loving God and taking care of each other, particularly the taking care of each other part. So, how do we do that? There are three general classes of tasks that need to be done in preparation for hard times. Accumulation of realistic, keyword, realistic stores of material resources, development of skills, and creating and nurturing a community network. We will be touching on all of these to varying degrees over the next little while, but for now I want to focus on one in particular, the development of skills. Some time ago, this congregation was involved in a group called the Simple Living Circle. It focused on skills that could be useful in a variety of settings, from hobby to Holocaust. Since there is nothing as revolutionary as an old idea, I would like us to revive and retool the old Simple Living Circle. Since this sharing of skills is a part of our ministry and of taking care of each other, I would like to take one Sunday per month and revamp the service to focus primarily on learning a new skill of some sort. We will still involve God in the process, but rather than focusing on singing and sermonizing, we will focus on learning. And by way of fair warning, some of these may run long. We will try to keep to an hour framework, but we may run over a bit. I'm still working on how to get these lessons out on our internet site, but I have some good tech people that I can work with. That's part of this community network thing. So as we continue to move through these challenging times, we need to be able to lean on each other the same way that the first century Messianic community did. And like that group, we need to learn to rejoice in our adversities, because it is a sign that the times are right for Messiah to return. May Yahweh bless you and watch over you. May Yahweh smile on you and be gracious to you. May Yahweh look upon you with favor and give you shalom. Amen.